Hello, everyone, and welcome to She Said, She Said, as we kick off our fourth year together in what we hope will be a fun and fantastic 2021. I'm co-host Lena Stagg, the culinary chef and author of the Recipe Records series, a collection of rockin' cookbooks that offers recipes and menus based on your favorite songs, as well as snippets of rock history, trivia, and true stories from the Rolling Stones, those righteous 70s groups that one of our distinguished guests today will tell you about, 80s rock icons such as the Cars, and that's a hint as to whom another one of our guests today just might be, and of course the Beatles. You can check out all of my books and sign up for my free newsletter at lenastagg.com, and my newsletter will go out this week, I promise. And if you're ever in Evansville, Indiana, please drop by and say hello to me at the Pit Barbell Club. My husband and I purchased this historic and awesome gym in 2020 during a pandemic, and we'd love to show you around and give you a complimentary day pass to work out safely and effectively with us. And speaking of working out, here is someone who never stops working, my co-host, Jude Sutherland Kessler.
Hey guys, Happy New Year. Happy 2021. Woohoo! We are so glad to have you guys with us for yet another exciting Beatles-inspired year here on She Said, She Said. I am the author of the John Lennon series. It's a collection of highly researched historical narratives, not historical fiction, but historical narratives on the life of John Lennon. Now, the first 4 books, which are available for you to enjoy, book 4 is in physical form still. I have a few copies of that left, but books 1, 2, and 3 are on Kindle. Some of them are on all ebook formats. They detail John's life from his birth in 1940 right up to the end of the year in 1964. And right now, I am about halfway through, maybe a little bit more than halfway through, on the research and the writing of Book 5, which is going to take you on that whirlwind journey through the busy and the thrilling year that was 1965, which of course is Help and Spaniard in the Works, and the North American tour in which the Beatles played Shea Stadium and met Elvis, all of that good stuff. So check out the first 4 books in the series at my website, easy to remember, johnlennonseries.com, johnlennonseries.com. And while you're there, sign up for my monthly newsletter, and like Lena, I promise it's going out this week. In December, I was very fortunate to be able to be on several radio shows talking about John Lennon 40 years later after his passing. I was so thrilled to be on Radio Israel as they remembered John, and Euronews, and several shows like J.V. Johnson's show across the United States. So links to all of those things for you John Lennon people will be available, so do not miss out on all of the fab fun and information.
You have been such a busy bee, Jude. Well, I think we all feel very lucky to be here in 2021 for whatever fun lies in store, in hopes of a much brighter and better year than the last.
Yes, we do. And there's one word, I may even have it tattooed on my arm, vaccine. That's what I am looking forward to. Vaccine! We really, look, we faced our share of challenges over the last 12 months, and not just COVID, but here in North Louisiana, 5 hours inland from the coast, we had a Category 1 hurricane. And, of course, the economy, and especially you, Lena, starting a new business in this rocky world. I mean, there were some real challenges in 2020. But here's the thing. To be fair, there were some really bright moments as well. And that's what Lena and I would like to share with you guys today.
You're right, Jude, and we ask 6 of the people whom we think made 2020 special to join us tonight. People who did remarkable things, people who succeeded despite the hurdles they had to face while making films, writing and publishing new books, putting out new CDs, taking on new and exciting radio shows, and, well, forging ahead. So our first guest is not only a dear friend, but a clear example of a never-say-die attitude in the face of adversity. He is the co-host of the Talk More Talk podcast, as well as the co-host of the popular Everything Fab 4 podcast.
And not only that, he is the very respected author of many, and I say many, and we didn't even include all of them in this list I'm about to give you, but he is the author of many excellent award-winning books on the Beatles and on those integral people around the Fab Four. One of my personal favorite books is his Long and Winding Roads, The Evolving Artistry of the Beatles. And it was written several years ago, but I still consider it one of the most insightful books ever penned on the music of John, Paul, George, and Ringo. As I said that when I read his book, the Beatles' music became for me a pop-up book. He really discusses the dimensions that are in the songs. And then he did a 2-volume work on the life of Sir George Martin, which won all kinds of awards across the globe. For Beatles people, I would say that Volume 1, which is maximum volume, might be the more interesting of the two because it really centers on Martin's many years producing the magnificent work of the Beatles. But in Volume 2, he's still interacting and working with the Beatles as well and a lot of other people in his continuing career. And Volume 2 is Sound Pictures. It is also a fascinating work. And there's one other great insight into each and every Beatles song, and that is his 2-volume Beatles Encyclopedia. Years ago, Bill Harry did a Beatles Encyclopedia, and Bill truly focused on the people and the places in the Beatles world. And our guest today really focused more on the music. So you put the two together, and you've got everything you want to know about the Beatles. But this year, he released what I personally consider to be one of his greatest works, and that is John Lennon 1980. It is a careful, thoughtful, well-researched, and beautifully written book on the life of John Lennon in his later years. And I was very, anytime that I read something about John Lennon, I'm always hesitant because I'm always thinking, okay, is this really going to tell the truth and get into the weeds and really give all the details? And this book was phenomenal. So Lena and I are thrilled to welcome to our podcast our colleague and dear friend. I'm going to bring him on the line, Dr. Ken Womack. Hey, Ken, welcome to She Said, She Said.
Hey, guys. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We are singing your praises, man.
Oh, you're way too kind, but I sure appreciate it. Anything from you guys is truly meaningful.
Well, I was just saying that even years later, we are so impressed with Long and Winding Roads. I use it constantly, as well as maximum volume. And I didn't even talk about Solid State. You have done some magnificent work, and we thank you for that.
Thanks for being such great inspirations and, more importantly, such good friends.
Well, thank you.
We really miss the fests and all of the opportunities to get together, so at least we get to kind of hang out a little bit on a podcast.
Well, Ken, as you know, I was really fortunate to be able to pre-read your book, John Lennon 1980, to write the review on culturesonar.com. And that review, guys, listening out there, is still available for you to read. And I have to say, I approached the book with a bit of trepidation, but I was blown away by your work. And I guess the part I dreaded was reading the end of the book, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But look, it is a beautiful, considerate work. And the title really focuses on what you cover more toward the end of the book. You start in 1980. You do a lot of flashbacks that explain 1980, but you know, your book is so much more than 1980. Give us a good idea of what your scope of study was in the book.
You bet. So I was interested in having a book in the world, and this is how I approach every project. Is this book necessary? Will it help communicate something? Will it, at the very least, aggregate some important facts and tell a compelling story? And I wanted a John Lennon book in the world that wasn't a true crime book, that wasn't about the terrible thing that we know happened late on December 8th, 1980, and all the terrible repercussions from that day. I wanted the book that wasn't that. And when you look at many of the books that do study this period in John's life, whether it's a single day or various parts of those latter years or solo years, they tend in their own way not to focus enough, to my mind, on the art. So I wanted a book that let us understand and follow the pathway that got him from going back into the world of music and succeeding so magnificently right up into those last moments. So that's how I approached it. And I, originally intended only to talk about 1980, but those songs, as you know better than most, Jude, really come from an earlier place. They come from, the early parts of his reunion with Yoko, sometimes even earlier. Some of those melodies had been around. So I wanted to make sure that the full process and progress of those stories got to be told too. So that's why I ended up going a lot further back than I planned.
Yeah, you thoroughly cover the 1970s, and I know we don't have time to go into this, but for the people that really need to buy this book, just the story of how Watching the Wheels came to be, and this goes throughout the book. I mean, it reappears every 15 or 20 pages or so. Just the progress of that alone is worth the price of the book. I thought I knew a lot about John Lennon, and I learned so much from your book. It was really great. But and I know you know what I'm going to say now, but one of the most exciting parts of the book was this incident that occurred in the last year of John's life. And it was that adventure aboard the Megan J. And you and I think that everybody in the world knows this story, and, surely they know what we're talking about. But look, a lot of people have no idea what happened. So without giving anything away, tell us a little bit about that dramatic event.
You bet. And it really is that event, the culmination of John's dream that was a relatively recent dream as far as we know, of learning how to sail, of learning how to, and I think this is the most important part, of learning how to do something for himself. This is a guy who could afford all the servants in the world, all the assistants, and after a chance trip on a charter boat called the Imagine, as you know, in February 1980, John knew that he wanted to learn how to sail and to be able to be empowered by that experience. Now, of course, none of that predicted what would happen on that trip from Rhode Island to Bermuda in June 1980, when, of course, John and a very well-experienced crew, I might add, including Captain Hank Halstead, who was a veteran seaman, not to mention Tyler Conis, a Long Island teacher, quite frankly, of the art of seamanship. These were pros and some of Tyler's relatives. So when they took this craft, they had a lot of pros on board. What's interesting is when they all go down with seasickness during a storm, and all but Captain Hank, that is, and John, and they're left alone to pilot through the maelstrom. And at one point, John's by himself up there on deck, singing sea shanties, as he liked to point out, and really just connecting with himself and nature, possibly for the first time ever. And what amazes me about that moment is the way John would talk about it in that blitz of interviews in the fall of 1980 as this moment where he really, for the first time, felt alive, which is amazing because he's John Lennon. You would think that he's already had those kinds of experiences, but no, it's right there in the nick of time in his last summer.
And I think if you said to him, John, what was more exciting in your life, Shea Stadium or the Megan J., he would have, without blinking an eye, said the Megan J. I mean, it was
Totally.
Yeah, don't you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it was John by himself. You know, he's not up there with anyone. It's just John. So I absolutely loved it. But of course, another segment of your book that I was sort of not looking forward to were the events of 8 December, or in Liverpool, 9 December 1980. And if I don't tear up, I have to tell you that I thought the way you handled it had a real tenderness to it, because you didn't focus on the sorrow or the tragedy of that day, but you really focused on the joy that John had gathered around him during the last year of his life. So give us a little bit of your vision about John's life in 1980.
This is something that I'm proud of, the way when I approach a story, I always keep my head in the moment that I'm writing about in that instance. So, you know, until it happens, until that guy shows up, and I don't name him, of course, because John Lennon doesn't know his name, on the streetscape there on the afternoon of December 8th, that's not in the story. And I made a little rule for myself when I started out that, and I do this for the most part with all of these works, I like to keep myself in that place. I don't know what's going to be coming over the horizon, right? And if I'm sitting there on John's shoulder, I can't see those things. If he can't see them, they're not part of the story yet. And so I wanted it to really reflect, instead of what we all know is coming, what he's feeling. And you've read the interviews, even right down to that wonderful last bit with Dave Sholin and Lori Kay. I was speaking to Lori just today. You know, he is elated. He is engaged. He's driven. And even later that night, outside of any reporter's earshot, he's there in the studio. They have finished a new mix of Walking on Thin Ice, and John looks at Yoko. Could even be in the hour before the most terrible thing happens. He says, "This is the direction." You know, so he's pushing forward. He's impelled by creativity and artistry. It's just amazing.
It was amazing, and I started it. I had a big chunk of the book still left to read, and I was going to break it into two parts, and I could not put it down. I read straight through till about 8:30 in the morning without being able to put it down. So please, please, please tell our listeners where they can get a copy of John Lennon 1980, and also, Ken, where they can follow you on social media.
Well, I'm on all the grams and the books and the tweets and the this and that. So you can find me all over that internet in a good way. And, of course, I have a website, kennethwomack.com, and, of course, books are available in these online COVIDian days on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all of those good places.
Well, Lena and I thank you so much for kicking off the Best of 2020 show. And from my heart, I thank you for work that truly shines light on those good moments in John's final days. And there were some good moments. When I think of John Lennon 1980, I will always remember that in his last year, John, as you showed us clearly, was no less talented than he was in 1964, and he still had a ton to offer the world, but as a wise entertainer always does, he left us wanting more. So that's what I took away from your book, Ken, and I have to tell everyone listening, John Lennon 1980 is not fiction, it is not imagined, it is not embellished, it is not to be missed. So get out there and get a copy of that book, Beatles fans. And Ken, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you guys, and I can't wait to see you guys again when we're all safe and sound and can commune at the fest or anywhere else.
Absolutely. Great to hear your voice, Ken. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and again, Happy New Year. Let's hope it's a good one.
Woo!
Absolutely. Jude has said so much over the past few months about Ken's great book. I can't wait to read it in 2021, among other things. And we hope that all of you out there will get a copy as well. Now, our next guest has not yet completed the work he was doing throughout 2020, but we have our fingers crossed that in 2021 he will dazzle us with a brand new film about the Beatles' 1964 World Tour. And that drummer who sat in with them for 13 days on that tour, Mr. Jimmie Nicol, our guest literally wrote the book on that topic entitled The Beatle Who Vanished. And now his bestseller is coming, as they say, to the big screen. So we are chuffed, as they say in Liverpool, and thrilled to welcome to our show the rock and roll detective, our dear friend, Mr. Jim Berkenstadt. Hey, Jim, welcome to She Said, She Said.
Hey, thanks, Lena and Jude. It's great to be here. I love being on your show.
We love having you here, and we have to say we love you more than Chaz Newby.
Yay! Finally.
It's a 2021 miracle.
It is a miracle, and I will cherish that forever.
Okay, Jim, we're on needles and pens, to quote Jackie DeShannon. Tell us all about the film, and how did it come about, and what is the focus?
Okay, so the book came out, and it did really well, and a lot of people saw a lot of things on, Facebook and other social media, and then all of a sudden, one day, out of the blue, I get this mystery call from a lawyer in Los Angeles, and she said, I have two important, VIPs who want to option the film rights to your book. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Mm-hmm. And then I said, well, so who are they? And she said, well, I don't think I can reveal that. And I said, well, then I don't think I can give you the option rights to the book. I said, I think it's important when you're, and this goes for everyone, when you're optioning rights, of your book to a film, you kind of would like to know who you're going to be working with. And so, anyway, she finally gave it up, and it was Ashley Hamilton, George Hamilton's son, and Alex Orbison, the son, of course, of Roy Orbison, who had toured with the Beatles. And she explained that Alex had always thought that was really cool that the Orbisons had toured, with the Beatles, and that their families were close. And he's a drummer, so when he read the book that he heard about on a Facebook post that someone shared with him, he was like, "Oh, this is a really interesting story." So anyway, after signing a deal with them, I was then contacted separately by a UK film studio called ECOS that has done some really great historical films that relate to the United Kingdom. That's kind of their ballpark. And they loved the book and wanted to make a film about Jimmie Nicol and the first Beatles World Tour, and also really to explore that double-edged sword of extraordinary but temporary fame and how it affects an everyday person, in this case, Jimmie Nicol. Mm-hmm. So I put them together with, with the other two, and we created this three-way deal. And so now I'll be serving, or I'm already serving, as executive producer on the film, and I'm also the script consultant working directly with the screenwriter, whose name is Paul Verra, and he wrote an interesting film about punk rock called Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, which is a biography of a rocker named Ian Dury, who had a group called Ian Dury and the Blockheads, and their big hit was called Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. So he's really into rock and roll biographies, so he's, I think, a perfect guy for this.
That's awesome. So will your film have Beatles music and live footage of the Fabs?
So that's a really great question. Since we're just in what's called the development stage, it's really premature to say exactly what actual sound footage and photos could appear in the film. Because, of course, the first thing really is we have to all wait for the script to be written and approved to even know what scenes, are in the film. But, assuming, I think we can all safely assume that there will be significant part of the film devoted to Jimmy playing with the Beatles on their first world tour. The actual live music of Jimmy playing with the Beatles is just audience bootleg material. It's not multi-track soundboard quality at all. And though bootlegs exist from that time with Jimmy on drums, they're not really of usable quality, and they wouldn't even be good to play on a radio show. So since Jimmy played live with the Beatles and he didn't play in the studio, I'm sure it would make sense possibly to use Beatles studio recordings, but I'm not sure that's a good idea either, because then people will say, oh, you put a bunch of screaming on over the top of Beatle recordings and Jimmy didn't play on it. We all know that Beatle fans are experts, all of them. So, there's a lot of questions about how to best do that to not only please the hardcore Beatle fans, but also the everyday music fans who will find this movie of interest. So I'd say on that, time will tell. I do think there could be some visuals of things like the Beatles and Jimmy getting on and off airplanes, going on stage, and especially that famous shot of Jimmie Nicol sitting in the Melbourne airport. Yeah, after his time with the Beatles is over, and he looks kind of shell-shocked. But I would just say, it's really too early to give you that kind of any kind of definitive answer. It's just until we even know what the script is and what scenes will be shown.
Sure, there's a lot to that process. It'll be exciting to find out who plays Jimmie Nicol. Anyway.
Yeah. Not only that, but he ages through the story in the book. So
does he look like a lawyer from Madison, Wisconsin?
No. But I think that maybe there might be two Jimmie Nicols, and a young Jimmie Nicol and an older Jimmie Nicol. It's premature until we know what kind of shape the script will take.
Sure. So do you have any idea if the script will ultimately indicate what happens to Jimmie Nicol?
Well, do you think inquiring minds want to know that?
Big time.
I was going to say that. You took the words right out of my mouth.
We want to know.
Yeah, I know you guys want to know. Well, I think fans want to know. I would just say, I would answer it this way, again, because we're really somewhat early in this pre-production process. Every film that's based on a true story contains, a bit of Hollywood license, as they say. And that is where a fictional event or fictional characters are used to make the movie more compelling or more dramatic. And I'd say that, probably 99% of the characters in the movie will be actual people who Jimmie Nicol interacted with, but there might be one or two characters, hypothetically speaking. For example, maybe someone during his pre-Beatles time, say, could be an older musician who sort of mentors Jimmy or gives him advice. But I can tell you that based on what I know so far, based on the film treatment, which comes before the script, that I think the film will end on an upbeat conclusion. I think it will be a hopeful ending and will incorporate a real event that I learned about after the book was published that leads to this upbeat ending. So I would say, stay tuned, no spoilers.
Absolutely. That sounds terrific. Well, I'm sure that the Beatle fans will be able to keep up with the progress of the movie on your social media sites and your website. So if you don't mind, please fill us in on all of those links.
Sure. So two of my websites. One is rockandrolldetective.com. We'll have news and tell people. It also shows people what I've done in the past. And the book site is called The Beatle Who Vanished.com, where you'll find updated news, more info on Jimmie Nicol, a free book excerpt, You can order signed books by me, and also, more importantly, probably the best way to keep up is with the newsletter that I send out via email every now and then. So you can, you definitely won't say, gosh, this guy's sending me a lot of junk, because it'll only be every now and then. So you can sign up for that newsletter. Also on Facebook, I have a page that's facebook.com/rock&, Roll Detective. So people can follow me there. And in terms of when the film might be coming out, that's a question a lot of people ask. We need COVID to end, and then production could possibly start, I would think, in the fall of 2021, which would mean probably a release hopefully in late 2022. But this thing is, this COVID is so unpredictable, and it's having an impact on TV and film. We'll just have to wait. We all need the vaccine, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But we have a good, excellent, talented team in place, and it will come out, and I'm hoping that we can all view a special showing of it at a future Fest for Beatle fans in person.
Yay!
That sounds like $1 million right there.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Well, we are going to be there, of course. We'll be front and center. So, but we're so delighted about the work. You get your work premiered in a movie, and we applaud you for this wonderful accomplishment, Jim. So keep us posted on the film's release, and we will tell all of our listeners too, because everybody's going to want to see this.
Amen.
So thanks, Jim. We wish you the best.
Thank you, Beatle Buddy.
Thank you so much for having me on, and I'll happily come back and share news when I have some. And also, lastly, I have a new book coming out later this year that I'll tell you about sometime in the future. It contains mysteries involving the Beatles and the Traveling Wilburys, so stay tuned.
Awesome. Thank you. We appreciate it, Jim.
Take care so much. It's so great to talk to you both.
You too. And it's so refreshing to hear throughout the past year that good things were going on. And look, behind the scenes of COVID-19, progress was being made, and that is 100% the case with our next guest on the line, who, with his super group, the Empty Hearts, pushed ahead in this pandemic and shutdown, which I know must have been extremely hard to do, to produce a new CD or an album, actually. So we'll have to get him to tell us whether that's a CD, album, or both, or whatever. But it offers us the inspiration that music provides. And we are talking, of course, about none other than the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame lead guitarist for the Cars, Mr. Elliot Easton. Elliot, we are so glad to have you back on She Said, She Said. Happy New Year, sir.
Happy New Year, ladies. So nice to talk to you again.
Well, it's great to hear your voice. Thanks so much for making the time to come on our show again, Elliot.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, we've got to cheer you because you did it. Despite all the setbacks of 2020, the shutdown, the pandemic, look, you guys were superheroes in the Empty Hearts. You just persevered, and you brought us this brand new album. It's the Empty Hearts second album. So for those people who must be living on the moon and don't know about the Empty Hearts, tell us about the members of the group and all about this new collection of songs that you put together.
Okay. Well, besides myself on lead guitar and backing vocals, we have Clem Burke on drums from Blondie, and Wally Palmer from the Romantics who's singing lead vocals and playing rhythm guitar and harmonica, kind of the John Lennon role, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Andy Babuch from the Chesterfield Kings playing bass and doing background vocals as well. And this is our second record. We're really proud of it. I mean, the whole confluence, I guess, of circumstances, of the coronavirus and everything, it has prevented us from being able to tour on this new record, which is really a shame, and we will get to it, when the world reopens. But we're really proud of the record. For Beatle fans in particular, one point of interest is we have Ringo playing on one song, a tune that came out as a single called Remember Days Like These.
Yep.
And so we have, a Beatle playing on one track. It's become a tradition. Our first record, we had Ian McLaughlin from the Small Faces playing keyboards. May he rest in peace. And but this time we got Richie to play, and it was fantastic. And the record, in term, relating it to sort of you guys in a Beatle themed show, it was a second record, and it was, when you're making your first record, even though you may be friends for a long time, becoming a group and getting that chemistry going is something else again. And it requires hanging out together and traveling and having meals together and writing songs together and hanging out in hotels and gigs and playing a lot of shows. And then you really start to become a band and you get a chemistry going. And I think with this second record, there's shows the growth of us sort of knowing more about each other's abilities, and being able to expand on what we did on the first record and get a little bit more adventurous. Mm-hmm. So, if in a Beatles-themed way, and I'm not comparing the music in any way, but one thing I always loved about the Beatles was how, like, if you take, I don't know, whether it's the White Album or Sgt. Pepper or Revolver, you could have, say a beautiful ballad like Here, There, and Everywhere, and then like a crazy psychedelic montage like Tomorrow Never Knows, or on the White Album, like a beautiful finger-picked acoustic ballad like Julia or Blackbird, and then a crazy, almost heavy metal song like Helter Skelter, and then a country western song with Ringo. Yet it all sounded unmistakably like the Beatles, even though they were working in all these really, or like a 30s vaudevillian song, like Honey Pie or When I'm 64. But it all totally sounded just like, you couldn't mistake what band it was, even though they were working in these like really disparate idioms.
Right.
And I wanted to go after that with the band. I wanted to try to expand our palette a bit and stretch out a little bit. And I think we accomplished that. Now, I'm not comparing us on a level with the Beatles or anything like that, but in terms of like what the goal of the record was, it was to sort of make like one of those records like that came out when we were kids, where it was like an event when a new Beatle album or a new Stones record came out, or just an important album, and you'd go over to your friend's house, whoever your cool friend was that had posters on the wall in the bedroom, and, turn the lights down, maybe light some incense or something, and you wouldn't even talk. You would just listen to the whole record, both sides, and just stare at the cover and read try to glean as much as you could from it, and the lyrics and so on. And the records would sort of take you on a trip. They weren't so much individual songs as they sort of start you off at point A, and then the record would end and drop you off at point B, and you just got to open your eyes and go, whew, that was something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. You accomplished that. You really did. I mean,
That's trying for. I'm not saying that anything on a level of like a Revolver or something, but within our little band, that was the goal, to try to make not just a collection of songs, but something that took you on a little journey.
Yeah, you did. And I have to tell you that I love all the songs. If you go to the Empty Hearts website, listeners, you can get samplings of the song and hear them. And some of them we'll talk about in a few minutes were released on 45s. But or single offerings, one of the songs that I love is The World's Gone Insane. And look, to me, it's right up there with Revolution. And man, your lead guitar, it is blistering hot. And
wow.
It is, I loved it. Tell us a little bit about the experience of recording that song.
Well, it was just sort of, I had this lick, and the fellas helped me finish it into a song. But the funny thing is about, like, some of these songs is how long before coronavirus hit and how many of the songs turned out to be sort of like lyrically relevant, you know. So we put out this song, "The World's Gone Crazy," you know, and the world was going crazy, and then Halloween rolled around and we had Jonathan Harker's Journal, you know, on orange and black vinyl. And when I heard you mention before you brought me on, you were wondering about the different ways the record is available, and it's available on CD and it's available on heavy gram vinyl, like 180 gram vinyl for the audiophiles, and awesome. Also, you know, you can hear it on Spotify and so forth.
Yeah,
you know.
It's great. Yeah, tell them a little bit more about Jonathan Harker's Journal, because that was a really interesting song too.
That was just like a weird little riff. You know, all of us guys in the band are real fans of the classic Universal horror movies, and that's the truth of it. Like Andy has a store called Andy Babuch's Fab Gear in Rochester, oddly enough, and where he sells Rickenbackers and Hofners and Gretsch guitars, and it's just the coolest music store you ever saw. And he has a widescreen TV in the store. He's always showing shindigs and hullabaloos and Beatle movies and James Bond movies. And then every Halloween he shows all the monster movies, the Universal monster movies like Frankenstein and Dracula. Mm-hmm. And he's just really into that. So he had this lyrical idea, and we just went for it. It just seemed like a fun thing. You know, it's not like a dark, scary thing. It's like a universal monster scary thing, like the Wolfman or Dracula. You know?
Yeah. It's really good. Who sings vocal on that? Who does the lead vocal?
That's Wally.
Really good. Yeah. Really John Lennon-esque. And
then, you know, there's one that I wrote pretty much entirely by myself, and I was going to do the lead vocal on it. And because of logistics and what was going on at that time, I couldn't get to where they were recording at Stadium Studio, but I wrote one called Death by Insomnia. and that one's kind of like coming from, like, if you listen to it, it's kind of like a cold turkey plastic ono, really stark, you know, close to the bone, just boom, 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 kind of, you know, plastic ono band kind of cold turkey thing. So that was really a lot of fun, really aggressive. I'd probably sing it live.
Wow.
And, you know, there's just all kinds of stuff, you know, sort of like acoustic-y stuff, and there is a lot of Beatle-y stuff. There's a lot of there's a few songs that have a real Byrds flavor with 12-string guitar and that sort of jangly sound, folk rocky sound, and a lot of variety, like we were, you know, hoping for. We just got to sort of stretch out a little bit more than the first record because we were more aware of each other's abilities.
Yeah, it is so good. And for people that don't recognize the name, Andy Babuch, it's the one that did Beatles Gear, that excellent book that people depend upon for what guitar, what you know, bass, whether John's using George's famous hootenanny, if he borrowed George's guitar, if he's on this Rickenbacker or whatever, Andy has all the answers. So that might be a link, you know, for people too. Well, okay, so now I'm gonna.
It's kind of become the Bible as far as Beatles gear, and so can you imagine having me and him in the same band? how we get to geek out?
Because
not only does the guy have a music store with all the coolest new gear, but where we record at his studio, he's got every sitars, mellotrons. Dulcimers, harpsichords, Wurlitzer pianos, Hammond organs, every toy that you could have imagined, Indian drums, African drums.
Wow.
And so it's just insane. You know, we just have a lot of colors to play with.
Yeah, well, it shows in the CD. It really does. Now, this is where Lena is going to disown me, but I have to say, because she loves the Cars, and I love the Cars, but I am a bigger fan of the Empty Hearts. I mean, you guys totally brought it on this second album, and I highly recommend it to everybody listening today. Get a copy of the Empty Hearts. So tell people, Elliot, where they can do that and how they can follow you on social media.
Well, you can go to theemptyhearts.com. We have an official Facebook page. You can find the record on Amazon or wherever fine music is sold, the iTunes store. You can listen to it if you subscribe to Spotify. You can go on our site and order limited edition vinyl and the singles, because the Ringo one was issued as a single. And then what we're thinking about doing, and I think it's a real good idea, because we were sort of stopped in our tracks with the record being released and then couldn't tour, we kind of feel like we didn't reach nearly as many people as we'd like to. So when venues open up again and people can again commingle, I think what we may do is put the whole thing out as a deluxe thing with everything on it, and, you know, like as a re-release, like kind of bring it back out and tour and, you know, make people aware of it. But what else, what can you do? You know, what can you do?
Well, you've done so much. I mean, at a time where a lot of people just threw their hands up and gave up, you guys pushed through to give us a great new album, and it's fantastic. When you start touring, don't forget about Bossier City's huge CenturyLink Auditorium right here in the Twin Cities of Shreveport-Bossier. Paul McCartney played there about 2 years ago, and I will host you all at a big Louisiana jambalaya and bananas Foster dinner.
God.
So
you won't have to ask me twice. I know Bossier City. I'm sure I played there either at a fair or a casino or something with Creedence Revisited. I'm sure I played around there.
Yeah. Well, the CenturyLink is huge, and we would really love to have you here. Elliot, thank you for taking time to join us, because we need to hear from people who are positive and happy and did great things in 2020. And Lena and I really thank you for being one of those truly bright spots in the world, no matter what. We wish everybody in the Empty Hearts a great 2021, and just continue to do what you've always done, man. Shine on.
Well, thank you. God bless, and right back at you. And to all the wonderful Beatle people that listen to you, we love you, and we're all part of the same community, and it's just great to talk to you guys always.
Thank you.
Let's hope for a better year.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We love you, Elliot, and we love your band, so we are on board for you guys.
Love you right back.
Thanks so much.
Okay, bye. Bye, ladies.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now, another person who really hung in there in 2020 is a close friend of ours who was kind enough to come on our show in March of 2020 to tell us about what life was like in New York City during the COVID explosion. He gave us the true story of what was going on and not going on in the Big Apple, but even then found things to look forward to and to celebrate. For several years, he has been one of the co-hosts of the Fab Forum with Dennis Elsis and Bill Flanagan on Sirius XM. But Jude and I got to know him long before that through his many years of excellent work as a host and MC for Mark and Carol Lapito's Best for Beatles Fans in New York and Chicago. However, in December 2020, he took the helm of his very own unique Beatles music-based program on Sirius XM Channel 18, the Beatles Channel. And here to tell us all about that really big show is our Beatles buddy, Mr. Tom Frangione. Hi, Tom. Welcome back to She Said, She Said.
Hey, Tom.
Hello, ladies. Happy New Year.
And to you as well. Glad you made it home safely. And
hey, it's so great to hear your voice again. We just have been talking about having you on here all week. We've been squealing, so we're just excited to have you here. So, as they say in Liverpool, what's the griff? In other words, what's the scoop on your new radio show that you're hosting on Sirius XM?
Well, there's a lot, as we turn the page into 2021, a lot of new programs that are going to happen over at the Beatles Channel. That's Sirius XM 18. There's your plug for the night. But we started this one actually mid-December, and as many of your listeners on tonight's show, who I know from the Fest, and certainly all your panel of esteemed guests, all you guys out there pretty much know I love collecting Beatles music almost as much as I do listening to it, and digging into, backstories and finding rarities and, really piecing the whole story together. So it was really an honor to be asked to audition a couple months ago to host a weekly show that they developed now that they feel that the channel has really hit a good groove and has cultivated a following and has cultivated listeners and really matured to a point where we can do some things that are a little bit deeper. And this weekly show is focused solely on rarities in the band and solo Beatle canons. It's a show called Way Beyond Compare. It's kind of a cool name. And each week we look at the songs, as we say, that you don't hear much on the radio or find laying around the house every day. And, someone asked me, is there any such thing anymore with a full-time Beatles channel and all the podcasts, all the internet radio, and all the streaming? Is there any such thing as a rare Beatles song? Well, we think there is, and certainly when you open it up to the solo catalogs, there's plenty. So what do we consider a rarity? It's pretty much anything not in that big black stereo box of all the EMI masters. So from the Beatles, it can be BBC stuff, it can be live tracks, it can be demos and outtakes, and certainly the past few years between Sgt. Pepper, the White Album, and Abbey Road, we got 3 box sets full of that stuff. It can be things in the solo careers that they gave to tribute albums and soundtracks, and even, when they do a duet or an outside project with another artist. So we try and keep it balanced between, call it alternate versions of familiar songs, so that the person who's just driving around in the car and happens to flip on the Beatles channel doesn't say, boy, they're really in the weeds here, and I better get out of there. We try and mix it up with, let's say, an alternate version of, pick a well-known Beatles song, Across the Universe, which happened to be the first song we played on the channel. We played the John's demo from the White Album box, which is just a stunning outtake, and it seemed to hook people in pretty quickly. So we mix it up between alternate versions or rare versions of familiar songs, and then some real records that people may not have in their collections, things that aren't in rotation on the Beatles channel. And even, one of my gauges for success, here we are in week 3, is when I, prepare all the voice tracks, because we're still in COVID mode here, and I send my producer the list of songs to play, and he writes back and says, yeah, that's great. We don't have that in the Beatles channel library. And I go, yes. That means it's never been played on the channel. Yes.
Wow.
It adds a little excitement for me, too, to know that, we get in the weeds, but we get right out.
That's fantastic. That is just so special. And you're the only guy in the whole world that can host this show.
Well, thank you for saying that. And, admittedly, a lot of it has been friendly fire, the feedback that we've gotten so far. But, hey, there are some people listening to this right now, no name pal, who can be, I enjoy, I'm talking, of course, about my longtime partner at the Fest for Beatles fans, Al Sussman, who gives me a very honest critique every week for other shows, like we do the Fab Forum, which we've been doing now for close to 4 years. And, Al will tell me, hey, last night was some of the best radio you guys have ever done. Or he'll say, yeah, it was okay, it was all right, but you know what, when you're going to get me into something like blah, blah, blah. So, the honesty I always appreciate. But knock wood, the feedback thus far has really been exceptional. And I think it goes back to what I said before. The channel was confident that we can go a little bit left to center, keep it interesting, keep it good. I mean, we don't play it just because it's rare. It should still be appealing. Because remember, as much of a backstory as I might tell about a particular recording, there are going to be people who aren't making this appointment radio. It just happens to be on in the car. People are coming back from lunch or they're on their way to work. And, if they can take one punchline away from it, like, hey, I was listening to the Beatles channel on the way to the office, and I didn't know there was an acoustic version of this song, and right. Have a little water cooler chat. If somebody takes something like that away, great. Some of the more the more rabid fans, some of the folks who, we see at the fests when we get a chance to be together in real life, people who have, said, boy, this is appointment radio for me. They've commented, wow, I loved that story about this particular song. And to kind of give people an idea of what it really is, I mean, this week is episode 3, and just to give you a kind of an idea of what you can find in there, it's only a half-hour show, so generally only get about 7 or 8 songs in there, plus the backstories. But we have everything from Ringo on a Roger Miller tribute record doing a Roger Miller track called Hey, Would You Hold It Down, to a song that was rejected by George's record company, Flying Hour, which he put out later as a bonus track, a live version of Imagine on acoustic guitar from the Apollo.
Wow.
The Beatles doing an electric guitar version of And I Love Her, and the one that seems to have gotten everybody all razzed this week was John Lennon with Yoko Ono joining Frank Zappa and the Mothers at the Fillmore East in 1971. Now, what makes that interesting, as I said on the show, is, well, that's already on a John album. It's on that live bonus disc that came with the Sometime in New York City album, so that really doesn't qualify as rarities. But Zappa himself put that out years later when the rights reverted to him, and he could put it out on his album, and we heard it in a completely different mix. It's much longer. It has a second guitar solo passage, which wasn't on John's Apple album. So it's really a place to find a John and Yoko performance that's outside of the normal Beatles and solo Beatles canon.
Wow.
That's incredible. That is so incredible. Well, you have a perfect combination of things in the show that will attract people that are just kind of fair weather Beatle fans, and then the rabid, like you said, the rabid fest for Beatle fans, people that know everything about all the Beatles. So this is perfect. So tell us what times you will be on the channel. This show will be on, because I know that it's rebroadcast several times throughout the week.
Right. The new episode premieres each week on Monday at 2 p.m., and all the times I'm going to give you are Eastern time. I know you have listeners in all different parts of the country and, in fact, all over the world. But the new episode premieres Mondays at 2 p.m. Eastern time. It repeats on Tuesday at 11 p.m., so our West Coast folks love that. And then it's back to drive time here at 4 p.m. on Fridays, and then a real nice slot on Sundays at 10 a.m., right around brunch time. And, again, those are all Eastern time, but it's always available on the Sirius XM app. So just either search Tom Frangione or Way Beyond Compare, and you'll be able to find it and hear it at your convenience.
Oh, that's incredible. That's truly incredible. I knew they had that function, but I've never used it. So now I can do that. That's terrific.
Yeah.
So for
the past week it wasn't on, and people were saying, but I'm searching and I can't even find it. Well, last week, the week between Christmas and New Year's, there was loads of countdowns and holiday programming, so that kind of threw the schedule into total disarray, and if you went searching, it wasn't there, and people said, oh, my God, they've canceled him after 2 episodes. What has he done? But we're back in the saddle. The new episode premiered yesterday afternoon, so it's up there online on the app if you want.
Excellent. So does the app have all of the episodes?
No, they generally only carry them for a week or so at a time because, like the Fab Forum, we have so much content going on. As I said at the top of the call, we have some other new ones coming up, and one of them actually premieres this coming Wednesday, the 13th. I guess will be the first episode of another new show that I will also be involved in with a co-host, David Frick, a longtime editor for Rolling Stone, and he's been our guest and co-host on the Fab Forum, and we have another show that we're going to be doing. So there's tons and tons of new programming that's coming to the Beatles Channel in 2021.
Great.
That's absolutely terrific. Very, very good. So I know that you know everything there is to know about the Beatles, and there's hardly, I mean, I know Bruce Spizer knows a lot too, but I kind of think Tom Frangione might know more. So
some years ago we had a runoff trivia question. I'll let him tell you how that ended.
So do you, when you're doing the show, do you feature any guests on there? Would you feature a Bruce Spizer on there?
No, this one actually, it was a different type of show. So, coming out of the Fab Forum, the stars of that show are our guests, our callers, and we put ourselves third, the hosts. That's the stars of the show. This show, though, way beyond compare, the star of the show are the songs. This is what people are tuning in for. They'll get a backstory, and they might get an oh wow factor, like, oh, I didn't know that was only released as a download and never on a record, or only came out in Japan, or something like that. There may be a wow factor there, but the wow factor is serving the song, and the songs really are the star of the show. The other program I alluded to, which will begin next week, may have some guests, but you'll have to go to the Sirius XM website to get the full announcement. I'm not allowed to tell you what it is yet, but I'll just tell you, go to the website, and you may just see another show cropping up next week, beginning on the 13th, which is going to be a ton of fun.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, I can't wait. We will be checking that out ASAP as soon as we get done recording our show.
Yeah.
So another question for you. It's a biggie. Do you know what the chances are that we will be having a Fest for Beatles fans in Chicago in August?
Well, I don't know the answer, and, obviously it all rests on how vaccines roll out, how quarantine rules go in the state of Illinois. Will they allow it? And even if they do allow it, is it something that the hotel will be comfortable doing? We are scheduled for mid-August, as you know. We were scheduled for last August, too, and we all know how that worked out.
Right.
Without getting, too opinionated about, this horrible, horrible thing that has cast a pall over all of our lives the past year. I heard Bruce sign off and say, hey, get vaccinated. I know I'm going this week. I can't wait. I never thought, I'm a guy that hates needles for any reason. And I never thought I'd be terribly excited to say, I can't wait till Saturday when when I'm sitting down getting that vaccine. Without certainly politicizing it or sensationalizing it, there's, a faction of people that are saying, I'm going to wait and see first. I want to be sure that there's not, any kind of bad side effects, and they might be a bit gun-shy saying this thing got fast-tracked, and that's okay. And then there are some people who, would have to be taken kicking and screaming to go get it. So I don't know how, never mind a fest, I don't know how going to a movie theater or a restaurant or anything is going to be as the vaccine rolls out. I mean, do you go to the movie theater, hand in your ticket, and have to show your vaccine card? I don't know. I don't know. I know about as much about that as you guys do. I'm certainly glad that this comes with a vaccine card, so people can evidence that they have been vaccinated. It'll give, certainly give me a better feeling knowing the guy sitting behind me in a movie theater, has had the vaccine. But we still have a full year of this as it rolls out. I'm glad to see that there's a third vaccine that's hit the market. But there's hundreds of millions of people that this has to get to before we get that immunity. So, look, I'm hoping more, as much as you guys are, I swear, just to have fests again and concerts again and ball games again and going to movies again. It really has been a tough year. But it sure put a lot of things in perspective, like, just be glad you're around to comment on it. We've lost a lot of Americans. We've lost a lot of people around the world to this horrible thing.
Absolutely.
It's terrible. It is terrible. But we're so glad that you brought some light into 2020 and that you persevered, and you have 2 great new shows coming out. So, good on you, man, for surviving. And Tom, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for loving the Beatles, and thank you for the work you're doing.
And right back at you guys. Stay well, stay safe, stay fab, and I swear to God, I can't wait to see you guys and give you a big group hug. I owe you 2 years' worth at this point.
Absolutely. Well, we will take you up on that. So thank you so much, and be safe and stay healthy, Tom.
Right back.
Happy 2021.
Bet. Take care.
Well, Lena, we have a caller on the line from the great state of Louisiana, or as some people say, Louisiana. Nobody in Louisiana says that. And I think that it just might be the guy that I call the Beatles Effenpedia, the guru of Beatles music and the author of 13 books, and that may even be wrong. It may be up to 14 now, including his premier book, which has won all sorts of awards, The Beatles Are Coming, one that I'm using constantly in my work on 1965, Beatles for Sale on Parlophone Music, because the Beatles, initially recorded everything on Parlophone. Such a good book. A 2-volume work, The Beatles on Capitol Records, because simultaneously they're releasing everything on Capitol in a completely different and sometimes unrecognizable format. A few years ago, he put out The Beatles Get Back to Abbey Road, many, many, many more exhaustive, in-depth works. And he is such a highly regarded Beatles music scholar that he was asked to pen the questions for the Beatles trivia game. And that game is hard because this guy knows his stuff. And additionally, he is the much sought-after speaker at the Fest for Beatles fans. We'll have to ask him how many fests he's been a part of, because I know that he was also part of the Los Angeles Fest for Beatles fans back in the day when they still had that, and the Las Vegas Fest for Beatles fans. So he's been part of that wonderful group for a long, long time. But he also is a fixture every year at Abbey Road on the River. He was our featured speaker, our featured author at Beatles at the Ridge, and returned another year to Beatles at the Ridge in Walnut Ridge, Arkansas. And he was at the Grammy Museum Beatles Symposium with you and I as well a few years ago. But even more important to Lena and to me, he is our friend whom we are always so happy to see when our paths cross down in Nolans. So we are going to welcome to the show not only a respected author, but our dear friend, Mr. Bruce Spizer. Hey, Bruce, happy 2021.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be with you and Lena. It's always a lot of fun doing the show with you guys, and I wish we had time to catch up with each other, but we'll have to do that another time offline.
I know. We love having you on the show, and we were saying, well, we hope that this show runs smoothly, and I said, well, I tell you one person you can depend on. He will call in at the exact moment. He will speak exactly the number of minutes. You are so, so good. We always love having you on. So we're just going to jump right into it, because not even living in one of the U.S. cities that was hardest hit by COVID could keep a good man down. I mean, you kept working with your distance precaution. You told me how you came into the garage, took the elevator up by yourself, and continued to plug away on your latest Beatles Album Series release. And then about midway through 2020, you gave us what I feel is one of your best works, The Beatles Finally Let It Be, which is an in-depth study of the Beatles' final album. Bruce, tell us a little about the book.
Well, it was kind of a fun thing to do. The title is a bit of an ironic pun, because I remember as a kid, I heard about these Get Back sessions. Then I actually heard the Get Back bootleg over '69 Christmas season on the radio, and even taped it on a little cassette player. So I was familiar with these songs, and then around that time I started getting Rolling Stone magazine at the record store, and then subscribed to it. And it seemed like almost every issue, the Beatles Get Project was going to get delayed. It was coming out in the summer. Then, oh no, it's coming out at the end of the summer. Then it was coming out in November. Then it was coming out in December. Then it was coming out early in the year. And it was, when's it finally going to come out? And I even remembered reading in Rolling Stone where they said that, it would be coming out sometime in April or May, and then it said Apple, however, did not say April or May of which year, and that pretty much summed it up. So it was like, it's finally out when it came out. And then what's the number one question Beatle fans were always asking Apple the past decade? When are you guys finally going to release, Let It Be on film? And so I figured the perfect title for the book would be The Beatles Finally Let It Be. And, of course, ironically, it was finally going to come out in August, and then COVID-19 hit, and so it didn't come out in August. But I decided to put the book out anyway because I figured people could use something, at that time to distract us from it. So, but the book is part of what I call the album series, and all of these books have an opening section on how the record was perceived in America, because that's where I grew up. And so it talked about that and goes through, how the various songs and the albums that, were from those sessions were reviewed, how we were exposed to it. In my case, TV Guide. I read in TV Guide, and, 1969, the Beatles were doing this television special, and they had a picture of the Beatles on the roof. And then shortly after that, the Beatles were on the Glenn Campbell Good Time Hour, and there was a film clip of them doing Get Back. So the TV Guide picture became alive. And then there was another song, Don't Let Me Down, and a Beatles single with those two songs came out. And all of a sudden, Ballad of John and Yoko comes out, and then We're Waiting for Get Back, Abbey Road comes out. I mean, it was just crazy. And the next section in the book goes through what was going on in the UK. Bear in mind, in the UK, they had 4 music magazines that you could get every week. And so they were hearing about this from, constantly, whereas in the U.S., Rolling Stone was just beginning to get out there. And then our good buddy, my friend and your friends, Pierce Hemingston, did a chapter on it in Canada. And it was fun because Pierce tells his wonderful story of going to see the movie and seeing it as part of a double feature with the James Bond film. Imagine that. And then after that, our good buddy, this is like a who's who of all our good friends, Al Sussman, does a piece on what was going on in the world in 1969. It was a pretty crazy year, as you may remember. And our good buddy, and actually it was the world 1970, I'm sorry. His chapter is called 1970, the one after 1969. And our good buddy Frank Daniels talks about what was going on in song and film during that time. So that, gives you, and that's just about a little over a third of the book. And then we have one of my favorite sections in the book called Fan Recollections, where everyday people just write in about, how their memories of seeing the Let It Be film or, hearing the album or hearing the bootlegs or whatever. And we were able to do something a little special for this one because, when you think of Let It Be and Get Back, you think of that scene up on the roof. And so I was able in the fan recollection section to start it off with 3 people who were up on the roof. Ken Mansfield, who was the former U.S. manager of Apple, Kevin Harrington, who's the guy with the red hair you see in the film holding up the lyrics to Dig a Pony for John because John couldn't remember the words, and then our other good friend, Chris O'Dell, who, of course, was immortalized in George's song Miss O'Dell. And we got to hear their stories, and after that, it's wonderful the way it works because she ends her piece. I'll read it right here. Just before the police came onto the roof and ended the concert, I stood up and peeked over the edge of the roof at the crowd below. The look of wonder on their faces was something to behold. Well, the next piece is from Leslie Healy, who was in the crowd that day on that street. She was walking her dog to go through Hyde Park and drop by Apple just for the hell of it, and all of a sudden finds out there's this, rooftop concert about to start. So kind of fun on that, and even have a newspaper clipping from Thursday, January 30th, 1969, the late edition of the Evening Standard, and the headline is, this is so very British, Police Stop Beatles Making a Den. So, fun stuff there. And then, some of the usual suspects you'd expect to see, like, something from Mark Lapidus and, and something from, what's her name here? Jude, Southerlander Kessler. Well, that's you, Jude. So good stuff for that. And Lizzie Bravo talking about her opportunity to sing the backing vocals on Across the Universe. And even a guy from Russia who talked about having one of those tapes of it. Remember those, VHS tapes of the film, and that was his prized possession, and he still has the VHS tape. And he was in what was at the time the USSR. So,
wow.
Just really, really fun stuff. And then finally, the final section in the book goes through the, how it was recorded, and goes through the songs on the album, the songs on the Get Back album and all. And there is an overview, because I think that, it's truly a long and winding road from where you get to Paul has this idea. After we do the Hey Jude video,
mm-hmm.
They did that. That's really the genesis of the whole thing. They do Hey Jude and Revolution videos at Twickenham in front of a crowd. And Paul's like, I really missed going live, so we need to go live. And that's where the bug gets in. The original idea was we'll do songs from our new album, which would be the White Album, and some oldies. Then it was, well, why don't we learn some new songs, and we can be film rehearsing the songs, and we'll do this concert at the Roundhouse. And then that falls through, because George doesn't want to do a concert, and they end up doing something on the roof. So that's kind of a thing. And the overview of what were the different albums, where there were two different Get Back albums that were put together by Glenn Johns that were never released. And then we have, of course, the album itself, the Let It Be album, but it doesn't end there, because in Anthology, we got about a dozen or so tracks from those sessions, so you could do it yourself and put together your own new Let It Be Get Back album. And then, of course, we had Let It Be Naked.
Right.
So, I mean, it's, there's just so many different versions of it, and and I don't think any one version is completely satisfactory in my view, and I think it's kind of, I could pick and choose and program my favorites, and I've done that and put them on a CD and play it sometimes, but it's fascinating stuff. It really is.
Yeah, you cover all the aspects of it and all of the different iterations. Now, I have to ask you, because like me, you've really seen the benefit of offering your books on ebook. I mean, that's where the world is heading. So are you doing that this time? And are you including your bookmark for the ebook this time?
Well, we have multiple editions. We have our standard hardcover edition. The book's 9x9, and this book's about 200 and some odd pages. And, and that's available on the website, which is very simple. It's just Beatle, BEATLE.net, no S. And, we have that standard edition, and then we have what we call the collector's edition. And the collector's edition costs a bit more money, but we want to give you good value for your money. So if you get the collector's edition, you get a case, and you do get a bookmark, and you also get two, posters, plus you also get a free download of the digital book. Now, the digital download can be bought separately. If you buy the $30 hardcover book, you get a discount on the digital download. So,
right.
We make it available many, many different ways. And also, next August, hopefully, the Get Back film will come out. Hopefully, there'll be some new audio product. And I'm going to do an 8-page, 9x9 supplement that you can anybody can go on to Beatle.net and download it for free and print it out on your printer, or you can buy a nice, paper, full color one to stick with your book, or if you get the collector's edition, you get that mailed to you for free.
That's
so
great.
We have all sorts of ways. So that's kind of the idea behind it, and sometime this year I will be sending out things to people who get my email thing, and you can sign up for that, looking for fan recollections for other Beatle albums, because I want to start putting these together while, quite frankly, we're all still alive. Our minds are still sharp.
Don't say that. Don't say that. Well, so say the website for them one more time, Bruce.
Right. It's just Beatle.net.
Beatle.net. Well, Lena and I cannot wait to see you in living color, as we used to say in the 60s, with that peacock.
Amen.
And we will look forward to, hopefully, a Chicago Fest coming up this year. Our fingers are crossed. But until then, huge congratulations to you. And thank you for keeping the books coming. I mean, everybody loves the Bruce Spizer books, and we love this album series. So keep them coming. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right, I certainly will, and you all stay safe, and when you're able to, get vaccinated.
Yes, we will. Don't worry.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruce. We can't wait to see you in the Big Easy.
Likewise.
Take care.
Have a wonderful year, everybody.
You too.
You too.
You too.
Our next guest is no stranger to hard work either. Several years ago, he penned one of my favorite books of all time, 1965, The Most Revolutionary Year in Music. It was an incredible work that covers every single aspect of the mid-60s sound, from Muscle Shoals influence to the two Memphis schools of music to the Beatles and the California jingle-jangle melodies. It was a really great book that kept me completely riveted. I truly enjoyed it. And now he has a brand new book that zeroes in on my number one favorite music of all time, 70s music, entitled 1973 Rock at the Crossroads. This comprehensive volume on the 70s sound was a lifesaver for me in 2020. I found myself sneaking away and reading it and getting away from the reality of today to enjoy the music of 1973. And it was also the events in society in 1973. But I'm thrilled to be able to say thank you to our special guest today, Mr. Andrew Grant Jackson. Andrew, welcome to She Said, She Said, and thanks so much for your excellent book and for being on our show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me, and it's always been so much fun selling books with you guys at the Fest for Beatles fans.
Oh, well, we're glad to have you, Andrew. Good to talk to you. Lena's the big 70s guru, so we're going to let her proceed with the interview, but I want to say thank you, too. I absolutely adore your work.
Oh, thank you. You, too. I really appreciate it.
Both of us have, we quote things from the 1965 all the time. Jude's used it a lot, and it was just amazing how much data is in there about 1965. But you replicated the entire process for your 1973 book, and Jude is not a 70s girl. She said that. And she loves every era of music except the 70s. I just don't understand it. But I am definitely...
You like the 80s, but not the...
Love the 80s, love the 90s, love 2000.
Not the 70s. No, that's America. It's free. Freedom to do it.
Well, I was born in 66, and whenever I was a baby and until I in college, I listened to the radio all night long. My parents would put that in the crib to keep me quiet, and so like the songs of the 70s were like ingrained in my brain, and so whenever I hear them, it's just nostalgic and it's comforting to hear those songs, and I'm sure that there's probably a name for that kind of a situation in psychology, but I just love the rich and varied music in 1973, and you capture so much of that in your book. But since our time is so limited, let's get right down to it. Andrew, your book sheds light on the changes in society in the 70s, and you wrote, if the Cultural Reformation of 1965 to 1972 was a bomb, 1973 was the aftermath. So tell us what you mean by that.
Well, like if the Reformation was women's liberation, civil rights, the sexual revolution, proliferation of drugs and divorce, people wanting more freedom with those things, and then by 73 for white U.S. males, the struggle was ending in a sense, because the war with Vietnam ended in January '73, and then long hair was more accepted now in the Midwest, at least in the coasts. But I thought '73 was interesting because now there were these other groups that were embracing rock, but they still had these barriers to break, and for instance, in the rural areas, long hair and marijuana was still grounds for a beating. But the outlaw country artists, Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson, Waylon Jennings, they kind of helped to make the counterculture more acceptable there gradually as the 70s went by. And they started releasing their first outlaw country albums in '73. And there was like a new group of female rockers like Susie Quattro and these bands, Fanny and Bertha, that were coming out. And Fanny, believe it or not, they were the third all-female band to get signed to a record label, and they were the first one to release an album, which is kind of amazing, thinking that rock had been going for all this time, but here's the first band to release, an all-female band releasing an album. And It kind of paralleled, in a sense, like all the stuff going on with like Billie Jean King winning and, Roe versus Wade going on, and all the great women's liberation anthems, I Am Woman, and, even, You're So Vain, Carly Simon and Joni Mitchell, they're putting out these songs with these groundbreaking lyrics, that were really frank about their affairs with, James Taylor and Cat Stevens and Jackson Browne, and just probably, for me, Court and Spark by Joni Mitchell, I think it actually came out a day or two after in 1974, but she recorded it all through '73. And then you also had the gay liberation movement being reflected by David Bowie producing Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side, about like the Andy Warhol drag queens, and Elton John and Freddie Mercury are performing in these outrageous costumes, and then the last thing is like the counterculture was seeping deeper into the mainstream, with Carlos Castaneda on the cover, and then George Harrison singing about Ram Dass's Be Here Now. But all the crazy militants and cults and satanic rockers also started bringing about this backlash of cultural conservatism, which would kind of eventually peak, with Reagan, in the next decade. But the one thing that both sides could agree on was 50s rock and roll. And so there was this resurgence that year of like American Graffiti was a huge hit, and Happy Days started at the end of the year. And so it was just kind of interesting how like the bombing and was still creating all these aftershocks. So I really enjoyed exploring that.
That's really interesting, and I do kind of remember that resurgence of the Bobby Sox and that sort of thing.
Right.
So you also stated that 1973 was the year when the 60s legends released their climactic statements, while new giants and underground revolutions arrived to save music from decline. So you mentioned a little bit about probably what the underground revolutions were, but give us an example of a few of the 60s legends who made their climatic statements that year.
Well, in a way, it was the peak of the Beatles' solo careers. Like at the same time, like they all had these massive hits that year, and it was kind of the last time that every Beatle was having a big hit the same year. You had Paul had two number one albums, Red Rose Speedway and Band on the Run. That would be number one the next year, but it came out in '73. And Living in the Material World by George was number one with Give Me Love, Peace on Earth. And John Lennon was kind of looking back on all his 60s explorations with Mind Games. And then Ringo kind of summed it up with his song that he wrote with George, Photograph. And for the Stones, it was a really unique period for them. It was they had these really lush ballads with these epic guitar solos by Mick Taylor with majestic strings going on, and they also had all these other songs with these funky wah-wah pedals, which was a sound that they didn't really have before or after that. And, Pink Floyd had, fourth best-selling album of all time, Dark Side of the Moon, inspired by their old frontman Syd Barrett, who'd gone nuts after taking too much LSD. Quadrophenia, the Who were looking back in the mod movement from the mid-'60s. And, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Dylan, Knocking on Heaven's Door, Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy, James Brown. Elvis had his last number one album. It was just it was like a banner year for all of them.
So did your interest in all of those events that were taking place in 1973 draw you to write your book about 1973 instead of like just writing about the 70s?
Well, it came about actually because I wrote the 65 book and that was my passion. That's still like my favorite era of all time, but I was born in 69, so the 70s was kind of the one where you're talking about as a child, that's what seeped into my brain, from my parents playing it. And the publishers wanted to do another book, and they were kind of going between 72 and 73, and they actually decided because of I think Dark Side of the Moon and Elton John, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. I think 73 had a little bit more hits, altogether, great albums, but they're all. I think pretty much every year you could probably do a great book on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
right.
Definitely.
Well, I know that we could probably talk all day about the 70s. I'm hoping to get a 70s cookbook out there one of these years. But I really enjoyed reading the 1973 book and the different obscure tidbits that you had in throughout the book. Like, for instance, you mentioned that Bowie's song Lady Grinning Soul was a favorite song of U2's Bono. Now, I don't know that song, and I would have never picked it out and listened to it if you hadn't said that was one of Bono's favorite songs. So, but it is a good song. I really liked it. I don't know that I ever heard it before, but it's those kind of little delicacies that you weave into the timeline of the year and make the book so interesting. Is there a couple other lesser-known events that took place in 1973 that you could tease the listeners with?
I thought another thing that was amazing about that year was they had these so many new artists appeared that year, including Springsteen. They had their debut albums that year. Springsteen, Billy Joel, and Aerosmith, and the New York Dolls. And the funniest thing was when Aerosmith and Bruce Springsteen's albums both came out actually a year, today, January, as we're recording, at the beginning of January in 73. But Aerosmith's label totally ignored them for Bruce Springsteen. They thought Bruce Springsteen was going to be the big hit. And but then Bruce released 2 albums that year, and by his second album, the first one didn't do well. So then they're totally ignoring him for the new guy, Billy Joel, coming out. But both Billy Joel's first album, or not, it wasn't his first album actually, or was it? Not with him. Not sure, but it was Piano Man. No, that wasn't his first album. But that was a great. Was a great album, and Bruce Springsteen's first 2 albums were fantastic. And the other funny thing was Aerosmith's managers totally didn't like them, or didn't think they were going to do that good, and they thought their other band, the New York Dolls, was going to be the big money maker for them. But the New York Dolls totally imploded, and then Aerosmith. Right. I don't know if they're still going today, or technically or not, but they've outlasted everybody. It seems like pretty much.
Right. Wow, that is so crazy. But listeners, that's just scratching the surface. There's so much going in 1973, Music at the Crossroads by Andrew Grant Jackson. And, I mean, each of the Beatles emerging as stars in their own right, and disco was starting to come into its own, and soft rock was making a scene, and heavy metal, you name it. Andrew's book, you get to follow the history of each movement as it builds and morphs under the influence of other sounds. It's fascinating look at music history. So I have to ask you, Andrew, if you could tell us of all the schools of sound that you've discussed in the book that year, what would be your personal favorite?
Well, I mean, always the Beatles and the Stones and those classics were my favorites, but they were for so long that it was more interesting to really discover. Like, I got really into the punk stuff, which it's funny as the years go by, what seemed so hard and abrasive when, 30 years ago is now pretty mild, compared to even Black Sabbath, who when, in the 80s, I was like, I'm not into Black Sabbath. Now it's not that hard anymore. You listen to it.
Right.
But disco, I love the disco. And in hip-hop, actually, even they didn't actually record any songs, but what they consider the birthday of hip-hop was when this DJ started doing his special techniques in his sister's birthday party, Kool Herc, in the Bronx, so that was starting. Reggae, you had The Harder They Come that year, Bob Marley and the Wailers released 2 albums. It was so much great stuff that year.
Yeah, it's just awesome.
Jim Croce,
Absolutely.
Mott the Hoople. Keep going.
Yeah. So I just love all of the music that you explain throughout that year. So if listeners want to get a copy of your Far Out book, where can they go to find it, and where are you on social media?
On Facebook.com/1973book, there's a link to where to order the book, which is like Amazon and Borders and all those places. And then there's also, I've got Spotify playlists on there of like the top 200 songs, and Pandora playlists, podcasts, excerpts, and I also have the other Facebook pages for the 1965 book, Facebook.com/1965book. Solo Beatle book, that was my book on the solo Beatles, Facebook.com/solo Beatle book. And I also had an Elvis book, Facebook.com/Where's Elvis book.
Awesome.
Videos
That's
and
terrific.
stuff on all those.
That's terrific. Well, we are very much respect all of your work, Andrew, and look forward to hopefully getting to cross paths at a future fest in 2021, I hope. So thank you very much for joining us on the show today. It truly put a smile on our faces to have you here, and we wish you the very best in 2021.
You too. Yeah, it's great to hear both of your voices again. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. You've convinced me I need to take another listen. I guess what I don't like is disco. Let's put it that way. I don't like disco, but all the other things, yes. Especially John Lennon's work in the 1970s. I mean, I prefer that to the Beatles. I think it was his best stuff. So, you got me convinced.
Oh, good. Yeah, just skip the disco chapter and it'll be fine.
That's all you got to do.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Take care, Andrew.
Bye.
Well, Lena, we are almost out of time. In fact, we are out of time. But this has been great therapy. I mean, look, we got to be real here. 2020 was no picnic. And, I mean, it's still no picnic. Things are really tough. But look at all of the good that came out of that year. We have great films that are being made, wonderful music by bands like the Empty Hearts. I mean, I am fully endorsing this Empty Hearts second album. It's great. Wonderful books that have been written, and all of these friends who were with us tonight, our cherished friends in the Beatles world. And even though 2020 was really tough, it definitely had its bright moments. And guys, for Lena and me, one of the brightest parts of this past year was sharing She Said with each other and sharing it with you.
Absolutely. It was I'm so happy right now with all of the guests that we've talked to today, and I think that everyone is going to enjoy. It seems like it might not be such a giant thing, but I think just the small interactions that we can have with each other now feel so much more important.
Yeah.
So our focus in 2020 on our podcast was the Beatles family, and so we were so happy and honored to interview many wonderful people who were closest to the Beatles. And our past podcasts included Angie and Ruth McCartney, the Beatles' first bass player, Chaz Newby, Rogue Best, and there was one more guest who didn't quite make it into our 12-month calendar, but who will be on the program to wind up our glimpse into the Beatles family. And that super wonderful guest is Julia Baird, John Lennon's sister. Julia will be on the program later this month, and we are so overjoyed to kick off the new year with her. So stay tuned to our She Said Facebook page, and we'll let you know when Julia's show is ready for a listen. It's coming soon. I'll let you know about upcoming podcasts on my newsletter, which you can sign up for at lenastagg.com.
And I will keep you updated on my newsletter, one of which is coming out in just a couple of days, and it is on johnlennonseries.com.
So until later in the month when we sit down for a chat with John's sister, Julia Baird, here's to food for thought, food for the soul, and food for the love of rock and roll.
Ta-ra and shine on.